So there is a lot going on in the world today, particularly in the country. If you're even minimally following the goings-on in Washington, you'll know that there's a lot of information coming at us very, very quickly, in some parts in respect to the investigation of the FBI and Congress into the potential collusion of the Trump campaign into Russia's attempt to influence our 2016 election, and then also these new allegations toward the current president, President Trump, and his trying to affect the outcome of those investigations, particularly the one into the former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And so if you're like most Americans and you have a job and you have a family and you have activities outside of your job, then you're probably not following it as closely as you would like. And it's hard right now because there's a lot of news hitting us so quickly. It's difficult even for, I think, a lot of political pundits to keep up with. I've even seen recently now news channels putting live streams on YouTube, which, as far as I'm aware, hasn't been typical until within the last week or so, the last like 5 days. So it's a really interesting time to be an adult, a voter in this country. But it's also really hard to make sense of what's going on, particularly because it's such a high-profile thing. So we have the sitting president whose campaign in the election is under investigation, and so because of this high-profileness, a lot of the information coming to news sources is typically anonymous. So that makes it difficult to understand what is credible, what is potentially just someone's opinion on the matter, versus actual facts or actual based in evidence to what's going on. But this isn't to be political, this video. It's to really understand what's going on and why it's so easy for many of us to just bury our heads in the sand and not want to be actively engaged in this discussion and understanding what's going on in our country at the moment. And I think there are two things mainly that have caused a lot of people to not really want to invest time and brain cells into what's going on. The first thing is that there's this high partisanship in the country right now, where we have we've seen it for a while, but we have a Congress and a executive branch of government in this administration and in the previous that can't seem to agree on which direction the country should go in. And of course there will always be discussions and disagreements, and that is part of what makes the elected system that we have, this democracy, fascinating and work. But on one side you have, on the right, it seems many politicians who are more concerned with their own agenda and re-election, that they refuse to stand up for what I think most of us would agree are American values, and what and standing up for what could potentially make our country less safe, less great when it comes to investigating. Particularly, I'm speaking about investigating the potential collusion of the campaign into Russia, with Russia. And then on the other side you have the left who seem to take every little twig and run with it as if it were a big stick to beat down the Republican administration and the Republican-led Congress, and so really nobody's getting anything done. I mean, we've seen this with the AHCA coming through. We've seen it twice. We've seen it with multiple other bills that have been tried, that have Congress people have tried to pass, even prior to Trump's election and inauguration. So it seems like nobody can ever get anything done, and we're so quick to just jump on the other person or the other side to say it's their fault, or that, in these excuses of, well, what if the shoe was on the other foot? I mean, it drives me crazy, and as much as I supported Hillary Clinton in the election, it drives me crazy when it seems to be the Democrats or the news pundits' first reaction to anything that the Republicans or the Trump administration does. Well, what if this had been Hillary? She would have already been impeached by now. Those sort of excuses, and I think that the high level of partisanship is part of what has created this lack of interest in the current political climate. I was just listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago saying that millennials are really turned off to politics. They have no interest in running for office. That there's this idea that politicians are all just corrupt, or that they're not working for the people, that they're just working for their own interest, or their donors' interest, as a lot of people would say. So I think that has really divided us on who's interested in what's going on and then who's not. And the other thing, and this is, I think, the biggest problem, is that there's this idea of this blissful ignorance of what's going on. And I think when it comes to the partisanship, the only way we can sift through what is being used as an attack to beat the other side and what is a real concern, a real issue, a real solution, is education and knowledge of what's going on. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. This idea that we celebrate being ignorant of the facts, and this I think is really troubling, and particularly in this time when people seem so disinterested. And I personally can't imagine why people wouldn't be interested in what's going on, because I'm glued to getting new information on what's coming out of Washington right now. But I can understand where it can seem overwhelming to people, that it's better to just stay uninformed, stay uninvolved, and work on their own lives and bettering their own lives. And I think the true answer to all of this is that we have to educate people. I mean, we've seen in this country the massive amount of cuts to education funding for over a generation now, and how we now have voters whose education was either seriously lacking in some parts of the country, or in other parts we have particular standards of education, particular things that are taught that are decided upon by a couple people in the community and the school board, on the state level, who have particular agendas and particular ideologies that they want taught to the masses, and sometimes those ideologies are not based in fact. They're not based in any research. They're certainly not historically accurate many times. And so the level of competence, I think, for people to make decisions goes down whenever they're ill-informed, even from as far down as elementary school, middle school, high school. And it's the reason potentially why we are seeing the repeat of large historical events. There are similarities between what's going on in the Trump administration and Watergate. A lot of people have drawn similarities from the Trump presidency into other authoritarian dictators who have risen up in other parts of the world, certainly in other times. And so I think that the answer is we really have to start investing in education, and investing in ourselves to stay educated, and to know that we may not always agree on things, but we can at least know the difference between something that is fact and research based and something that is completely made up for the simple use of getting a certain reaction from people. So that's what I think. What do you think? Thanks for listening.